Alright, what's up, guys? It's PG229 here. We are back. I'm doing fully voice acted on this one because I've been streaming for a while. My throat hurts. This is how long I have left 7 hours left, 12-hour stream. But I decided since I played Seduce Me the Otome one, um, I would play this one. So I looked through my footage to see where I left off. I did the Diana's route, so we're gonna do Diana's route here.
Hold on there! Before you start the game, first of all, have you read the first story? Oh, okay. You do.
Yes.
Oh, awesome. All right then. Diana's a very interesting character, huh?
Yes.
Anyway, I have one last question for you. Some people like hearing the trigger warnings before they start games, while others don't really care and just want to play. It's cool either way, but do you want to know about some of the content listed in the game?
Yes, I do.
No problem. It's my pleasure. Well, this game is recommended for players ages 18 and up. Trigger warnings include suicide, war, torture, mentions of rape, and a large amount of violence and sexual content.
Alright, cool.
Don't worry though. Any sex scene choice you encounter is completely up to you. You can play this game without needing to go through the sex scenes and still get the good endings. Consent is important.
It is very important, Jess.
I think that should be everything. All right. Phew, that took a while.
You forgot something.
That's Diana now?
Huh? What did I forget?
You forgot about the disclaimer.
Oh, crap! Oh, how could I have forgotten about that?
It wasn't like that.
It's fine, I'll take care of it. This game was produced by Michaela Laws using the Ren'Py visual novel engine.
That's what I
We
use.
truly hope you enjoy this story.
Thanks, Diana. Now, don't you have a war to go fight?
I do. I just wanted to make sure everything was in order before the story began. I'll take my leave now.
Thanks, Di.
Do not call me Di.
Anyway, we really do hope you like the story. Have fun. See you at the end.
See you at the end. I think I did Destiny last time. I'll do this time again. I was in love with the succubus. It was true. I had fallen for the charms of a succubus, and I was about to dive headfirst into the demon world with her to save her kingdom.
Do you have any regrets?
None. I smiled as Diana held me and carried us both through the night sky. We had shared a sweet kiss, and the first of hopefully many in the future. We're about to cast a spell to enter the demon world. Diana looked to the ground that was far below us and pointed her free hand down towards it, closing her eyes. That's cool. As the last word left her mouth, a large purple pentagram appeared in the grass. Before twisting and becoming a black void, I gripped onto Diana, scared at what I was seeing.
Last chance.
I gulped at the sight, but sure of what to make of this. Was this really what I wanted to do? My curiosity, however, guided my decision and forced me to take a deep breath, close my eyes, and let calm wash over me before looking up at Diana. Let's go. Diana smiled and wrapped both arms around me, laying a protective hand over my head.
Hang on.
I tightened my grip on Diana, obeying her commands as I held tight. Felt air quickly began to rush past our bodies as Diana tilted back and began to let us fall towards the ground. Was she insane? I looked at Diana, seeing her smirk at me before closing her eyes. I did the same, naturally preparing for an impact with the ground. What I felt was a cold rush of energy, rushing over my skin, as if I had fallen into water. I opened my eyes and found myself staring into a vast, dark space, holding onto a woman who was no longer wearing clothes. Guess I can't see her nipples, so we're good. I was clinging to a woman who had no clothing, but instead had purple marks across her skin, the horns adorning her head. However, I could tell that this woman was still Diana by looking into her eyes. Diana smiled at me and kissed my forehead before tightening her hold on me, muttering softly. I held onto her body and I felt us begin to move through the space, as if a giant fan had pushed us forward. Onwards, we continued through the darkness. With me unsure of where we were going, Diana guiding the way. We began to slow us, and soon a small light appeared, slowly growing as we got closer to it. I had to shut my eyes as it began to consume us. I felt weightless. I could feel anything except the woman in my arms. Felt somehow exquisite. I wanted to drown in this feeling, become lost in it. However, our journey thought through the lights was coming to an end. The light around us faded away, and soon I found myself lying on Diana. She lay on the stone floor. The air, however, smelt of fire and blood. I looked up, seeing fire everywhere in sight. What the hell? This was the demon one? A loud shout forced me to look over and see a man, running at me with a spear in a rage-filled expression. I screamed and rolled off of Diana, scooting away to avoid being skewered. He continued towards us. No! I screamed. I looked up to see Diana kneeling in front of me, gripping the man's spear, pointing it away from him. The man stared wide-eyed at Diana as she glared back.
My lady, you live?
Of course I do. I told you I would return, and thus I have.
The man gave a small sigh of relief, lowering his weapon and propping it up. All I can say. Down the sound effects a little bit. It's a bit too loud. Cool. The man gave me a small sign of relief, lowering his weapon and propping it up to lean against it. As I examined him now that he wasn't gunning for me. He was wounded and exhausted, panting heavily and gripping his spear tightly.
So glad.
As he finally toppled over, Diana gasped and rushed over, kneeling beside him. I rushed over as well, wanted to see what was going on. Who was he? Why did he attack me? Why was the room on fire?
What happened?
We were attacked by the demon lord. He took advantage of your absence.
Began to cough violently. Need to get out of this. Dana, we need to get out of here. The Unedited grabbed my hand. Sorrows, chanting under her breath. The room around us began to shift, as if it were changing instead of us moving. Soon we were outside a castle, staring at it. Flames erupted from the... What was happening? Dana's face was a pure shock, staring at the castle in absolute terror. All the color, besides for the purple marks on her skin, had faded to pale white. And
we drove them back, but the flames are too powerful.
I still have to read, damn it. At that moment, something in Diana's eyes changed. Her anger sparked, and she stood, quickly walking around us and towards the castle. Diana!
Come! I command thee, white winds! Crush these fires beneath your hands!
She stared as the wind in the air quickly began to pick up, and a purple glow began to surround Diana's. It was like a storm was rushing towards us. There was no rain or thunder, just wind. The winds forced back the flames that danced on the windows, and smoke began to rise from each one, signaling the death of the fire. The windows continued to be filled with wind and air, most likely to kill the flames deep within the walls. I, however, could only stare at Diana. Her body was rigid, and her gaze was intensely focused on the stone castle. Soon the winds began to die out, and all that was left was smoke rising from the windows into the dark purple, black sky.
You did it. How?
I looked at Sarah, densely still embodied in her.
Where are the king and queen?
I heard Sarah's breath hitch, and I turned to look at. I had a look of pure pain and guilt that had happened, and I walked over and stared down at him. Now almost glaring daggers at him, clenched his fist at his
Speak,
side.
Zeno!
The imp demons. While we were fighting the flames and the army, the imp demons snuck through our defenses.
My heart, despite not fully understanding the situation, began to tighten. Something was incredibly wrong. Sora shut his eyes as a pair of demons I assumed to be allies rushed over and passing magic over his body and closing his.
They snuck into their room.
Then I suddenly turned and bolted towards the castle, causing me to jump up. Diana! I began to sprint after her, following her inside the castle and trying to keep up with her. Her panicked breath kept me following her direction despite her fast twists and turns through the ashy corridor.
No.
Hear Diana sobbing, praying as she ran. I did my best to keep up, not wanting to lose her, not wanting her to be alone right now. We turned into a long hallway that had a pair of golden doors at the end. They were unscathed, as if the flames had not disturbed the door or perhaps the room behind it.
Please be alive. Please.
Anna bolted for the doors and began to pull them open, grunting at the weight. I stopped running, skidding forward from the abrupt stop, whom she wanted alive, hoped that they would. As the doors finally opened, however, the foul stench of blood erupted from behind them, scent filling my nostrils. Gah! Anna flung the doors wide open. Only stare. The sight we both saw. Blood. Blood covered the floor, walls, the ceiling. The entire room was painted in gore, skin, bone, and massive amounts of blood. Only three things barely coated in red stood in the middle of the room. Ground. A few broken crowns and a small tiara that was barely large enough to fit a newborn.
No.
Anna slowly walked into the room, the blood of the ground painting her bare feet. We fell to our knees in front of the items, staring down at them. I couldn't bring myself to enter the room with her. I watched as she lifted them to her chest, curling her shoulders over herself and shaking almost violently.
Mother. Odebel.
Continued to grieve over the ornaments in her hand. Dark, almost deadly, and evil-looking auras surrounded her body. Began to flicker and grow, like a dark flame that wanted to engulf the room she'd knelt in. As I reached an apex, I began to violently flicker through the room around her. Diana arched back and screamed to the ceiling, voice heavily laced with magic, pain, and rage. She did that a lot better than I would have done that. I need to actually go pee. So I think that's a good spot for me to yeet out of here. So yeah, I'll be back. Drink so much water. I'll kill you all. Watching her body burn in the intense black and purple flame like energy made my heart stop in fear. I'd never seen her like this, and I was scared as to where her anger would drive her next. Shit. Save. I think it's better for her to just let it out, right? Get my distance, giving her space to mourn and grieve. She had lost 3 people very close to her, and she came back to her castle in flames. She needed space and time. I waited until she finished, curling herself and whipping coarsely. Anna?
Let's just go.
I want to see. Hold up. Let's load. I do want to see. What God? Stop her. Kept my distance, giving her space to mourn. She had lost 3 people. Needed space and time.
Let's
Wait.
just go.
Stop her. Okay. Yes. Okay. That's weird that it does that. I hate that. As heartbreaking as the situation was, I couldn't let anger consume her. Not like this. If she wanted to vent her rage, then better to aim too wrong. Not let it burn in the room where her family died. Stepped into the room, blocked the waves of energy from her face with my. Eventually made my way to the screaming. Diana! My words couldn't reach her. I stepped closer, almost towering over her, before dropping to my knees, bracing myself and wrapping my arms around Diana. Screaming stopped, and her body froze within my arms, and I quacked like a shivering child in my arms as I pressed my forehead against her hair. Diana, get your revenge. You must save that rage for the fight. I was met with silence as my reply. For a moment, Diana finally slumped into my arms, while the energy around her died out.
You're right.
Diana and I left the room with her unable to turn around back. We walked through the ashy corridors to the castle, Diana silenced by the sight, by her own grief. My heart was heavy for her. Still, the demon lord who had done this was still the threat at large. He knew when he would return. Diana led the way to her room, which as expected was as burnt as could be. However, Diana waved her hand through the air, casting some sort of silent spell. Though some sort of prejudice, presidation. The ash and soot in the room vanished, and the furniture and decor were repaired. We at last stepped in with Diana slowly lying down on the bed, unable to carry on any further. Looking at Diana's face, her eyes were puffy and red. Skin almost became void of any color beyond the taint of her demon mark. She wasn't breathing. One would assume that she was dead. Diana stared at the ceiling. World of emotions swirled in her eyes. Despite what had happened, at last, she spoke.
I need to send you back.
What? Now was not the time to think about me, and I knew it. Besides, I came here for a reason. I wasn't going to go back knowing Diana needed support. I had no regrets in coming here, and I would help her through this. No, Diana.
It's too dangerous here.
I don't care, Diana. Diana sat up slowly and looked to me, a form of weak anger in her eyes. However, I knew that it was fruitless to argue with me. After all, she made a deal with me. I can see the obligation to obey burned behind her anger. Diana closed her eyes and lowered her head.
The Demon Lord will most likely return.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we'll be ready for him. Stanley took Diana's hand and lifted her chin so that she had to look at me. The anger that was plaguing her melted into sadness and broken hope as she stared into my gaze. There were remnants of rogue tears adorning her face, and seeing her so scared made me frown. I knew we'd get through this. Just needed to rest for now. We would deal with this issue this world brought out.
My lady?
Diana and I turned our heads to see Serio by the open door and stepped away from Diana, giving her space. Behind him, multiple soldiers, servants, and other demons rushed down the hall, most likely to check for other issues and possibility to try to fix the damage on.
Yes, Zero?
Who is this human?
Brief moment, I can see a look of disdain in his eyes as he looked to me. However, it only lasted a second as he looked at Diana, waiting for her to reply.
Zero, this is my guest. She came back with me too.
Diana looked to me. Trying to find the words in my eyes. What was I to her? My curiosity bubbled. I also awaited the completion of her answer.
She came to aid me in this war.
But what of your fiancé? What of the other sons?
They are gone. They have disappeared into the human world, and I can no longer trace them. I have failed.
The guilt and grief in Diana's voice deepened, most likely reminding herself that she saw the result of failing moments ago. Sarah, however, stepped up to Diana and knelt in front of her. Surprising me, what was he doing? He was on guard, first off. Was he being bold enough to step to her?
You didn't fail, my lady. The Demon Lord attacked us despite giving us his word that he would wait for you to return. He broke his end of the agreement.
I know.
Staring at Diana and Sakura, I could see that they had a very close and deep connection. Sakura a friend, or something more? I could recognize the emotions within Sakura's eyes. He looked up at Diana. He looked to be in love with her, or at least had some form of ultimate care for his lady. Sakura gently took one of Diana's hands and placed his lips upon it. Instantly, I could almost see energy flow from his body into her. The kiss alone. Was this how energy transferal worked when the giver receiver? Color in Diana's skin returned, and she let out a sigh, her body relaxing out. Sakura, however, continued to keep his lips over her. Something in my gut irked me about him. Let him continue. Sakura was just giving Diana his energy. There was nothing wrong with that, but I get upset over it. Wouldn't. Besides, Diana needed energy to recover from her explosion of energy and quenching the fire of the castle. Used a lot of energy. Diana smiled at Sakura and softly pulled her hand away from him, making him look up at her, not in surprise, a smile of his own.
Thank you, Sarah.
It is my duty to serve you, my lady.
Sarah stood and stepped back, looking to his mistress and to me.
Do we plan to retaliate, my lady?
We will. I expect the Demon Lord will come for a second attack, not realizing that I have returned.
And we do then. Diana looked to me, a small glimmer of fear in her eyes. The resolve rekindled as she let a serious visage cover her expression.
I will meet him on the battlefield should he come again.
My lady, you've just returned.
That I have. But the Demon Lord will not care if he learns of my return. If anything, news of my return will spur him to attack sooner than later. I must be there and stop him.
Diana looked to Sarah with a cold expression, making Sarah stand up straight, like the guard he was meant to be.
Tell everyone to mend their wounds and prepare for a second invasion tomorrow. I expect the Demon Lord will be ruthless enough to attack in the morning. Let everyone know as well that their princess has returned.
Sarah nodded and turned to the door to do his job. Before he exited the room, however, Diana called out one last thing to him, which seemed to make him freeze.
And when you are done, please retire to my room. I will rest here for the night with my guest.
As you wish, my lady.
That. Sarah left, closed the door behind him. The way Sarah answered, Anna seemed forced. But I could understand why. After all, if he had feelings for her, it became an obstacle for him, as I was with her. That didn't stop me, however. I'm wondering where I stood with Diana. She was going to stay here with me. This was my room. Then I let out a sigh and moved to the bed, pressed against the back wall.
Come, we must rest.
I nodded and walked over, lying beside her, hoping instead of Diana lying down, she guided my head to rest on her lap. You're not going to sleep?
Demons don't sleep, dear. At least not in this world.
Why not?
Because if we shut our eyes for too long, then we open ourselves up for someone to take advantage of us, or kill us when we're not aware.
Gulped, now worried, frightened to sleep. Then chuckled, however, and petted my head.
You can sleep, however. I will be resting, but my eyes will remain open.
You truly rest like that?
Demons and humans are different, dear. Demons can function for years without needing to rest, as long as they continually feed on energy. However, demons can rest to stop spending energy. Thus why we have beds.
My curiosity began to peek at me again, but my exhaustion took control of my body. I felt my eyes gradually shut. I hear Deanna whisper,
I hope that you don't mind me taking your energy as you sleep.
"Why I let sleep consume me?" I shook my head. It was all right. I needed as much energy as she could, whatever the demon lord had. I felt almost a bit honored that taking energy from me, as odd as it. At last, sleep consumed me. Despite what was happening around me, the world of sleep was peaceful and calm. For a moment, I could truly be at rest. At least, a
My
moment.
sweet Isaiah.
I looked around the darkness of my dream, trying to pin down the direction of Sarah's voice. Why was he in my dream? No reason why he should have been there. Then the footsteps echoed in my mind, causing me to grip over it, and look around frantically. What was happening? At last, the line of darkness opened up to reveal it as an open door. Opening, it was Sarah. The kind smile on his face, staring into the dark space. What? I looked to him, but he didn't seem to notice me as he stepped into the room and walked past me. Followed his walk, gasped at what he was walking towards. Now illuminated by light, I took in the sight of Diana in a jail cell on her hands and knees, weak and fragile as she stared at the one approaching her.
Zero, what is happening? Why am I...
Shh. Everything is just fine, my lady.
My heart stopped as I watched Sarah kneel in front of Diana, slide his hand between the bars, lift her chin. Diana seemed to nuzzle hands softly and consciously make him.
Soon enough, I will destroy the Demon Lord and hand you the throne of the entire world. Everyone will bow to you as their queen and ruler, as they rightfully should.
Zero, I don't understand.
You may not understand now, but you will in time. I promise.
Diana crawled closer to Sarah, wrapping her hands around the bars to keep her up.
Where is she? What happened to the human?
For a moment, Sarah stared at Diana, completely oblivious to what. Hey, I'm right here. Despite knowing that what I was seeing was a dream, I instinctively called out to Diana, hoping she would see me regardless. My displeasure, she
Who are you
didn't.
talking about, my queen?
You know who, Zero. She...
Sarah silently my gripping her chin hard, making her gasp, stare up in shock
My
at him.
lady, I don't know who you are talking about.
Anna whimpered, told in fright. Fear painted over Diana's expression as Sarah pressed his forehead against the bars to stare deep into her eyes. I felt myself rush at Sarah to try to grab him, but my hands merely phased through his body like I was a ghost.
My lady, you must stay here for now.
Why?
Then a single word died out. She stared into Sarah's eyes. Something in her eyes began to shift from red to gold. Her black pupils slowly morphed into glowing black crosses. What was Sarah doing?
Why?
Because I have not yet finished the Demon Lord, my love.
Love. Why the sudden change in name? Only watch as Sarah leaned back with a grin.
Once I've finished this war, then you may come out and fulfill your destiny, with only me at your side.
Ooh, a little bitch. Staring at Diana, I watched as she began to shed tears. They were not clear as water, but black as oil. On her chest, a black burn in the shape of a cross appeared, slowly with some sort of dark aura.
May those useless memories burn away. Remember only the one who has served you his entire life.
Oh. Sarah. My words were futile, but I couldn't stand there in silence. However, as Diana's tears finally stopped, stains on her cheek drying along her chin, Sarah stared into Diana's eyes, burning his gaze into them.
Now, do you remember the human?
Who?
No, couldn't be. The burn on her chest flashed a bright white before settling down, revealing the permanence it had over her skin. There was a real scar on her flesh, no longer a figment of magic. Sarah smiled lovingly at Diana before guiding her head forward, leaning in to kiss her between the bars. Diana closed her eyes and practically moaned against his lips, most likely feeling some sort of energy from it. However, Sarah pulled away gently and made Diana pant slightly. Was she that desperate for energy now?
Never mind, my love. Forget I said anything.
Sarah ran his fingers over Diana's cheek, causing Diana to shudder at the touch, and let out a pleasured sigh.
Now rest. Nothing will harm you in here.
Diana nodded, before slowly lying to the side, letting her body slowly shift to slumber. Another chuckle. Sarah stood and turned around.
That human's life for a stone destiny. A perfect trait, if I do say so myself.
I snarled and rushed at him. He wound up running through his body and falling to the floor. Sarah rocked back towards the open door and stood by it, to look back at Diana with an almost evil-looking smile.
Nothing will keep us apart anymore, Isaiah.
Jumped up and ran at him, but as he stepped through, closed the door, I found myself shooting up out of bed. Sit up, panting. Gah!
What? What's wrong?
Looked over to see Diana sitting in the same spot she was when I fell asleep, staring at me with wide concerned eyes. There was no mark on her chest and no crosses in her eyes, which made me feel somewhat relieved. I looked around trying to see if Sarah was in the room, but he was nowhere to be found.
Are you alright?
Probably tell her, right? That's probably a good thing to like, hey, I had a weird fucking dream. Had to tell her about the dream. Turned to her and took her hands, making Diana's gasp and stare at me in even more confused shock. Dream last night, Sarah locked you in some sort of jail cell and wiped your memories. Didn't do anything.
Wait, stop. What?
Took one of her hands from placed it on. Seriously not believe me? Glared as she stared at my. It's true.
I believe you, but I want to see it for myself.
Stared at her, now realizing that she was taking energy from my forehead, and then closed her eyes and remained silent for a moment. Would she react? Pulled her hand away, she smiled at
It
me.
was a nightmare, dear. I'm sorry you had it, but I can assure you, no magic like what you saw exists, nor would Sarah ever do that to me.
Who knows? I stared. I could see the genuine feeling behind her words. Something in my gut wouldn't let us go. Could she be so sure that magic like that didn't exist? What if Sarah was a terrible person? What if...
Sarah has been with me ever since I was a child. I would know if he was a bad person. There's nothing to...
Suddenly the door of the room burst open, causing Diana and I to separate. Stared at the intruder. It was a soldier. He seemed to be a runner for the army, judging from his outfit.
Princess, the Demon Lord approaches!
Diana was right. The Demon Lord was going to show up today. I looked to the far window to see the sun barely up over the oddly colored purple sky. It was morning, and Diana expected. Diana quickly threw her legs over the side of the bed instead, pointing to the guard.
Tell every able-bodied soldier to head for the gates. I will be there shortly.
Yes, Your Highness!
The soldier ran out, followed by a handful of soldiers that either accompanied him or were heading in the same direction. I looked to Diana, surprised to see her ready. How much energy did she take during the night? As I got a good look of her, something about her seemed to have changed. Couldn't put my finger on it.
I have to thank you, you know.
Huh? For what? Diana turned to look at me with a smile. As she did, I can see a faint layer of purple energy surrounding her form, and her eyes glowing completely gold.
You gave me a large amount of energy last night.
Her voice echoed through the room, making me internally shudder. She sounded almost ethereal, and the power behind her voice almost drowned my senses. It was as if she were no longer a simple mortal, but a goddess. How much energy she consumed last night? As the energy and glow in her eyes faded away, Anna smiled. Anna gently took my hand and rushed with me to the guiding me out of the castle. Around us, servants and soldiers rushed in one direction or
I
another.
need you there beside me when I face him. You won't be hurt, I promise.
I followed step by step, nodding in reply. I felt a bit honored that she wanted me with her. Shook off the excitement knowing that walking towards the Demon Lord. Towards. Demon Lord was approaching and we would be face to face with it. Diana led me through the castle grounds and onto the battlements overseeing the distance beyond the kingdom, where a large line of creatures lined up and outlined the horizon. I felt my heart stop as the tallest figure stood between them. Taller than any man I had ever witnessed was a man I was meeting for the first time. The Demon Lord. The mere sight of him sent fear down my spine. This was the man who hurt Diana. He was my enemy.
City of Lilith, rejoice! You will fall before the sun reaches its peak.
Diana released my hand and stepped between the embrasures of the wall and walked through the air towards... I just realized we haven't seen our main character yet. We haven't seen her yet. This is weird. Diana reached my hand and stepped between the embrasure of the wall and walked through the air towards the ground like she was descending an invisible staircase. She did. I jumped at the sound of the soldiers on the ground, pointed their weapons towards the incoming army. Diana's voice bellowed through the air, causing the line of creatures to step back in fear. As her feet touched the ground, the air seemed to pulse with energy. However, the Demon Lord stepped forward with a dark grin. I feel like down.
Succubus, you have returned. You have failed to bring my sons home, it seems.
Demon Lord laughed at whatever Diana had shouted, making me worried for Diana. She'd be okay on her own? She stepped forward a couple of feet before pointing her palms towards the ground. Before my eyes on Diana's back, marks adorning her skin began to dance, a wee before detaching themselves from her body and forming two large demonic wings. They flapped against the air in unison, causing a large gust of wind to push forward.
Soldiers of Lilith, come to my side if you wish to shed my enemy's blood.
As Diana spoke, the soldiers who had gathered at the front rushed forward, stood in two lines at Diana's side, which were the weapons of the Demon King, his army in number. Diana and her soldiers were outmatched 10 or 20-fold. However, something told me that the battle would be in favor. At my sides, a far line of archers positioned themselves and aimed at Diana, ready to fire in command.
Steady, men!
I looked to the side to see Cyril walking down the line with his hand raised, waiting for a signal. However, the sight of him made me was in my... Could he be as evil as he was then? From Diana, a large thick tendril with giant mouth began to quickly spill out from the magic circle floating above her chest. sliding around her body and down toward the ground. As I stared, I could recognize the shape of the mouth when Diana first met me. She dangled over before letting me deal with her. Soon, a tendril released itself from Diana's body, took physical form with purple and black scales, head formed where its teeth had, convulsing with new moments as a wicked purple tongue lashed from its giant 100-foot snake now stood between the Demon Lord army. Diana's army. It hissed the creatures in the front line and quickly began to slither towards and hung. I didn't get a chance to watch it attack. I turned back to Diana to see her lift off the ground and form a purple saber and lifting it above her head.
For the pride of Lilith! To battle!
Woo! At her last words, Diana flew forward and slashed through the air, causing a large purple arc to shoot out of her saber, struck down a section of the Demon Lord's front line. I watched as both armies charged forward towards each other and began to clash swords. Beside me, a rain of arrows flew from the battlements down towards the incoming section of the Demon Lord's army, causing me to duck in case they returned fire. By surprise and glee, the Demon Lord army couldn't push Diana or back. They held their positions and cut down every enemy that came at them. Demon Lord watching instead of fighting, glared as Diana flew through the cutting down sections of their enemies. The snake that Diana had summoned was dealing major damage to the enemy as well, carving through the lines, devouring handfuls of them at a time. Each time it did, it either got bigger or became much more what? Menacing. You could barely take it all in. The battle was mercilessly, seemingly endless. Diana's army was small but had strong morale, cutting through the demons, lords, and men with ease. The archers beside me continued raining arrows on the incoming soldiers, hoping to nickel and dime their numbers for the ground troops. I was glad that Diana wanted me there, and knew that I wasn't ready to fight in the war, so I kept crouched and watched the battle safely. Eventually, Diana's armies began to push back, forcing the enemy soldiers to either retreat or try to regain ground. Diana, however, decided it was time to deal with the real threat and swoop towards the Demon Lord. Both demons arched their weapons at each other. Diana with her saber, and the Demon Lord with a giant sword, and clashed steel. As they did, purple flame and red lighting spasmed from the impact and pressed against each other in battle of strength. Demon Lord looked so much bigger than Diana, but somehow Diana matched his strength. Did not bulge in the parry.
How? You cannot be this strong!
You know nothing of true strength!
Some of the battling around the duel stopped, just from the sheer sight of Diana matching the Demon Lord's power.
I am the Princess of Lilith. I will defy your will and save this world from your tyranny once and for all!
Ooh, after gas echoed through the air, Diana somehow managed to push back against the Demon Lord, forcing him to step back in the parry. Diana was doing it. He was defeating him. Demon Lord slid his sword from the parry and swung again at Diana, making her block, but failed to push her back. He repeated his attack twice, 3 times, but continued to be pushed back each time. The soldiers around them took in the moral inspiration, fought back tenfold, forcing the Demon Lord's army back over the arching horizon. Diana and the Demon Lord, however, continued to clash swords, beating steel to steel. As the Demon Lord finally jumped back, he formed a large ball of red lightning in his hand, shooting it towards Diana like a flash of thunder. The attack impacted, sending Diana flying back, but with her wings, Diana managed to flip back and face the Demon Lord. Retaliation, Diana formed a spiraling set of purple fireballs above her hand, chucked them at the Demon Lord. With the glare, the Demon Lord slashed through each ball, forcing them to dissolve into the air.
Isaiah!
Diana glared hard in reply before flying at her opponent, slashing through the air with her saber. From there, it became a battle of blades and close-range magic attacks. Neither side would give in, and no soldier dared to step in, afraid of being the victim of one of their attacks. Soul became blurred by the sheer speed passing between them. Frantic and powered at once, was slightly dizzying. Finally, the two slid away from each other. Diana was intact, breathing heavily from exerting so much energy. The Demon Lord was weaponless. Adjusting my eyes, I could see that he was no longer carrying a weapon, gripping his arm tightly to stop some wound from.
How could this happen? How?
Diana didn't respond. She flew forward and engaged him again. I feel like a telecaster, like telecasting a battle or some shit. She flew forward and engaged him again. Stopped at the Demon Lord's body, became overcome by red lightning, as if the lightning had ended him. Demon Lord's body vanished.
I will return, and your kingdom will fall.
The voice echoed through the air, haunting everyone, making the trees around us bend and sway at its might. However, as the voice died out, the army of Demon Lords left behind vanished as well. It took a moment to take it in. We had won the battle, fought, drove the Demon Lord and his army out of the kingdom. Did it. Quickly, the soldiers of Diana's armies cheered huzzas for their victory, and his snake vanished at last. Diana herself slowly began to fly back towards me. I was grinning ear to ear as she slid between the embraces. Me. However, I did not expect Diana's eyes to roll into the back of her head and for her to collapse against me. With my arms around Diana, she indeed fainted in my arms. Diana!
Isaiah!
As I collapsed on my knees with Diana in my arms. Sarah rushed over and dropped to his knees beside us, taking one of Diana's hand. Diana, however, didn't react, even as energy began to flow from Sarah to Diana's hand. This is going to make him very upset, but I'm fit to kiss. Needed energy to recover and had to help. Gently took her head in my hands, kissed her, letting her unconscious. He'd take my energy. He'd feel warmth slowly coming back to Diana's skin as we kissed, making me slightly smile. And his free hand gently slid up between our bodies and cupped itself over the side of my neck. Diana was awake now. She was enjoying the kiss we were sharing. Wasn't going to let go just yet. I could feel my nerves dance as energy slipped from me Diana's lips. Before long, Diana disconnected the flow, pulling away slightly to look up at me. Diana slowly lifted herself up into her feet. Instinctively, Sarah and I both grabbed onto Diana's arms, helping her up. He looked to both of us with a kind smile.
Thank you.
I couldn't tell which of us she was thanking, but I accepted it with a smile of my own. Did it, Diana. You drove him back. Diana struggled a bit before standing up straight. Her wings that had been folded against her back sprayed out behind her near us, causing Sarah and I to step back. Diana began to speak, her voice booming through the air, and cheers around us became silent.
Friends, we have won this battle, but they will not be gone for long. This is the beginning of a war to end tyranny, to end chaos.
I could tell that every demon in the area had their ears and hearts open to Diana. I felt myself become full of courage just from listening to her speak.
You have shown great courage today, but you must build even more for the war ahead. The Demon Lord will try to cut you down, but we will prevail, as I am the last living heir to this grand kingdom. I swear unto you all that I will fight until the very end, and free this world of the evil that is the Demon Lord. With this, I urge you to stand with me and fight by my side, not as my subjects, but as my brothers and sisters. I ask now, who will stand with me?
The sound that came after was loud and eardrum piercing. The sound of 1,000 cheers beat through the air. It showed the allegiance of every demon in the area, and then some. I could only stare in awe as Diana took in everyone's cheers and took in a heavy breath. It was then that I knew I had become part of something grand, the sight of a woman who could change history. The following days were full of chaos. Demon Lord tried to come back and reclaim his pride, but Diana somehow managed to press back with ease. giving him more wounds than inflicted once. Inflicted more. It was like the castle became an impenetrable fortress. Soon word spread around the neighboring kingdoms of the demon lord's defeat, and you failed attempts to attack. Many leaders sent messages of allegiance, that Diana humbly accepted. Soon enough, we drove the demon lord army far back away from us. To every battle, she would wind up in my arms, much to the surprisingly obvious disapproval of Sarah. Whenever a demon questioned my presence, Diana would simply wave them off with a small token of praise toward.
She is my most honored guest, and she is here to help us win this war.
Still, the thought of what we officially were began to make me concerned. Diana see me more than an energy source, an ally. We had kissed before, turned, but since then I couldn't have been more sure. I began to question myself. Why was I here? I only shake my head in response. I shouldn't doubt anything. We were in the midst of a war, and with Anne at the front, he had many responsibilities, many that I could never even hope to think of. Pinnacle moments of our relationship, however, came when a brute demon stormed into the castle all on his own. He was unarmed and carrying a single item, which made many demons step away from it. Right. Diana, Sarah, and I were in the war room with three other beings whom I named Faye, Rabbit, and Shadow for simplicity. When the doors of the room swung open, everyone was forced to turn their heads from the map we were previously pondering.
What is...
Cortes became silent as the being who entered chucked the object in his hand onto the table. As it settled into a stop in the middle of the map, all the demons in the room stared in absolute shock. Lying on the table was a red, broken horn. There was no blood or bone in it, but it was indeed the horn of the being who had stormed in. I became confused, wondering why this being decided to throw his horn at us. As I looked to Diana, however, I can see the shock in her eyes. The expression on her face was a mixture of fear, surprise, and a little flattery, like someone had given her an exotic bouquet of bloody thorn to fill the roses. Diana finally looked up at the demon who had entered the room and examined him.
Brute demon. What is the meaning of this?
What does it look like?
It looks like you're swearing your allegiance to the rebellion. The question is why?
Swore allegiance from its horn?
It's a brute demon tradition. If they leave their tribe to serve a non-nomadic kingdom without marrying into it, then they must break a horn in allegiance.
However, from what I recall, there are no more tribes left in the demon world after the demon lord's mass genocide of the brute demons.
Said wide-eyed Shadow. Mass genocide. The demon lord had that much power to eliminate the entire demon race? I looked to the brute demon, seeing him glare hard at Shadow. His remark.
Well, he didn't kill everyone.
So there are more of you?
Flash of grief flashed in the brute's eyes before he looked down at the table.
No, I'm the only one left, and I refuse to let that bastard get away with this.
Felt incredibly terrible for the grief he had to bear. It must have been horrible to be the last of his kind. I looked at Diana, wondering what she would do with this information. The look on Diana's face was ignomic. She was obviously in deep thought, but how was she going to handle the situation before? Finally, she took in a breath and let out a sigh before speaking.
Sir Brute, you come swearing your allegiance to the rebellion. Is there anything you demand of us for your service?
It was the question she asked every alliance leader. They often asked for the promise of freedom, or an oath to protection from harm. The demons who were with us in the room simply joined out of their own interest. What about this demon? The brute demon rolled his shoulders back and stared hard at Diana, making her straighten up a bit.
I ask for you to perform ascending.
Ascending?
For the souls of your people?
Brute nodded before stepping up and placing his large hand on the table, staring at the back of it, torn shame.
My people did not deserve death, but their ashes now lie in the earth. There is no one who can give them a proper sending, so I ask that you, Succubus, do this for me in return for my service.
Aw. I looked to Faye, hoping they would explain, but Diana turned to me and spoke instead.
Dear, ascending is a ritual brute demons perform to honor their deceased. It is a ritual of both celebration and grief, so it must be done with a full heart.
Huh. Oh, thanks. Diana smiled at me and nodded before turning back to the brute. I was happy that she was still willing to teach me despite her position. The brute, however, finally took notice of me and
A
glared.
human? What is it doing here?
Excuse me, it? Him suddenly irritated and stepped forward to confront the demon, and it placed a hand on my shoulder and cleared her throat.
She is a vital part of this war, Sir Brute. Please do not disrespect her.
I looked to Diana, seeing her press her lips together in a final line and stare into the brute's soul. Part of me felt extremely flattered at her protection. However, I could practically feel Sarah's jealous aura from the other side of Diana. The brute took a hard stare at me before eventually nodding and crossing his arms. This guy's gonna fucking do the thingy we saw.
So, will you do it?
Anna took a moment to herself, staring at the wooden table in thought. Began to ponder as well about it. Seemed to be a worthy ally, but Diana seemed torn. Was it appropriate for a demon who wasn't a brute? I don't think I should say anything. I don't think I should, like, twist the tides, so to speak. After a moment, Danny turned to the brute demon and nodded.
Very well. I will perform the sending of your fallen kin.
When?
This afternoon.
Everyone hitched their breath in surprise at Diana's words. We performed the same day. Did she even know how to perform it properly? Anna? The chuckle, Diana looked to me with a small
I'll
smirk.
be fine, dear. I know a fair amount of brute demon rituals.
That afternoon became full of hustle. Servants were rushing back and forth trying to prepare for a ritual they knew little to nothing about. Luckily, Shadow and Rabbit helped instruct everyone properly. I was taken to my room and given an opportunity to rest, but as I sat on the bed, I felt restless. I didn't want to sit around and do nothing for the day. There was much I could do despite being a human. It wasn't some decoration. I followed my instructions and wandered, hoping to find Diana. I wanted to help her if possible, but as I approached the room, she was practicing in it. Catch a pair of voices.
My lady, I must insist.
Insist that I lock her in her room like a prisoner? Out of the question.
Quickly pressed myself against the wall near the doorway to listen in, now wondering what was going on.
She is not a pet or a slave, Sero. She is my guest and greatest ally.
I understand this, but she's also a human. Every time someone new comes to forge an alliance with the rebellion, the human's presence is questioned.
If they are turned away by a mere human, then they are worthless allies.
My lady, you are not understanding my point.
Then what is the point, Sero?
Small silence formed. I was in awe that Diana was defending me so hard. As for Sarah, I began to hear the jealous beast he was. What was he going to do?
My point is that people are questioning what she is to you.
Question pained me to realize, but I was curious as well. What was I to her? She vouched for me as an ally. But did she like me as I liked her? I came with her to fix this world, but I truly came for her. After a painfully long silence, Diana spoke
I
again.
care for her. Very much so. Like I care for you, Sero. She is very important to me, for many reasons. She has become part of my life, and anyone who questions why will be silenced.
Woo!
Is that enough to appease you?
It is not my place to be appeased.
Took a breath, taking in what Diana had said. Cared for me. I wasn't sure whether to feel happy or sad at that, but I had to take it in that she cared enough to protect and defend me. I didn't get to feel the emotion for long, however, as Faye flew up beside me and grinned. Panicked for a moment, hoping that they wouldn't give away my position, but they whispered to me, understanding.
Psst. We're about to go prepare the ritual dance area thing. Whatever. Want to come watch?
I opened my mouth to object, but was stopped by Diana's
Now,
voice.
please, leave me be. I have to prepare and cannot afford any more distractions.
I grimaced. I came to help, but I guess she had to work alone. I left with Faye, not wanting to be caught by Cero and understanding that she needed work. This ritual seemed very important to her and the brute demon that demanded it of her. In truth, I was excited to see Diana go through with it. The fact that she was willing to dance for a brute demon was surprising. When Faye and the handful of demons that helped them finish their work stood in the front line of the crowd surrounding the ritual area. To say that I was mildly nervous for her was an understatement. Did Diana even know how to do the sending? What she insinuated, she brought me the room. Be given instructions and follow them to a T. She'd be able to do it. A small, quiet wave of gasps came towards my direction, causing me to look over to where they originated. I stared wide-eyed at what I saw. Then I was dressed in some sort of dancer garb with purple paint over her already tainted skin. Shaping symbols around her body, hands were two large sabers glowing in the sunlight. She was absolutely stunning. Diana stepped between the crowd as they parted ways for her and into a chalk-drawn circle which separated the ritual area and the ones watching it. Her bare feet guided her to the center as a couple of other demons, each holding an instrument, set up near the edge away from where I was. At last, the air was filled with complete silence. The look on Diana's face showed pure concentration and focus as she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The drums echoed through the air as the dance finally began. I stared, mesmerized by what I was watching, and his entire body moved in time with the beat and instruments flowing through the air. Sabers he was holding glided through the air as if they were slicing through it with perfect ease. As the beat moved, her hips and shoulders rolled fiercely, like a hypnotic and passionate belly dance routine mixed with an African tribal step. However, her focus remained on the sabers in her hand, the circle she was instructed to dance within. Her bare feet hit the ground hard, their heels jutting into the dirt, not hard enough to disrupt the soil, but loud enough to echo alongside the drum beat. My breath was taken away by the sight. However, I wasn't the only one blown away by the dancing succubus.
She's beautiful, isn't she?
I didn't turn my head away, but I could tell someone stepped up to stand beside me and watch Diana dance. Two of us stood side by side, watching the person we both cared about give homage to an extinct human race. Joan's voice was barely audible over the sound of the drums and chants in the...
To accept this role is a great honor for her.
But my curiosity surfaced this statement. Was this dance truly an honor? It was meant to honor the death of thousands of brute demons. Was this an honor?
Brute demons are extremely devoted to proper ceremony and homage. Because of this, the role of Rage Dancer is often given to the most powerful and the most honorable brute demon in the tribe where they perform the sending.
Not a brute demon. I don't have a brute demon himself perform
Because the brute demon recognizes her strength. He knows how powerful she is, so he asked her to perform it in his stead.
Small laugh escaped Sarah's lip, causing me to glance over lightly before turning to watch the dance. So funny.
I apologize. Imagining that brute demon dance is rather humorous to think about.
As a thought popped into my head, I couldn't help but giggle. And I shuddered a laugh before letting it die quickly so we can continue to watch Diana, true dancer, the evening.
I love her.
I stopped my thoughts. I looked over to Sir and seeing his gaze still plastered towards Diana. His expression was cold and like stone, serious in what he had said and meant. He loved her.
I've loved her ever since we were children. I've been by her side through everything, and she's given meaning to my life. I would give my life for her if she demanded it.
Alas, Sir looked to me, a small fire burning in his eyes through his gaze. I see the devotion and truth in his soul, knowing how deeply he cared for Diana.
What say you to that?
What I say doesn't matter. Oh, God. Thor was serious about his affection. Was I? Sarah stared wide-eyed as I smiled and nodded to him, understanding his feelings. I'm happy when I'm with her. She's taught me so much during the time we spent together. About demons, 5 worlds. Still hardly believe it all exists at once. I looked back to Diana, seeing her continue her dance with a concentrated expression. The more I thought of her, the happier I felt myself becoming. I thought of all she had done, but what she did was a tragedy. It was in desperation. She had no choice. I understood that and knew exactly that without that act, I would never have learned about this world or magic at all. Before I met her, my life was boring and bland. Went to school, was only allowed to think about my future. When Diana appeared, she changed my life, put me an entire new universe. I'll never be able to thank her enough for that. I know you've been here for a very long time. Important to me. Shit, what should I say? Both loved and cared for her. I could tell that Sarah deeply and truly loved Diana. So did I. She'd done so much for me already, and I found myself captured in her spell. It had to have been the same. Given silence at Sarah's reply. And his dance. Surprising me. She had this much stamina. Despite watching her, she didn't stop to break once. Most likely expending energy to keep moving. How did the dance have to go for her? Let's load. I don't want to accidentally save on it. So Sarah needed to hear her importance to me. I just really loved her and wanted to be with her. That was why I came in the first place. I wouldn't let Sarah's love for her sway my feelings for her. I was given silence as Sarah's reply. The torchlights illuminated the space, and the moon was at the top of the sky. Then I finally stopped, panting hard, flashing the sabers together to cause a ring of steel to bounce through. The audience clapped wildly, many deeply captivated enough to stay the entire time. Some joined in during the later hours of the ritual. Brute, who I'm decided to dub as Sergeant, stepped from the crowd to the ritual space, walked towards Diana. Then the sabers vanished into the. Then I looked to the one approaching her, the tired stare. Silence lingered between them as Sergeant held out his arms to Diana. With a smile, Diana reached out and clasped her hand into his forearm.
Honorimus dirigendo pedes.
Victoria in consummatione.
Another round of cheers echoed throughout the air. The words engaged between them. I smiled, knowing that Diana had appeased Sergeant and his people. Diana released her hold on his arm, nodded to him before looking forward to me, and I quickly rushed over as she lifted her arms and placed it along my shoulders tiredly. Diana?
I need a little help.
I could feel Cyril's gaze on my back. Would he step in and fight me doing as she asked? I looked back to see him watching with a blank expression. What was going on in his mind? With a laugh to Diana, I led her back to my room. She sat tiredly on the bed. The exhaustion in her face was clear and her body quaked from overexertion. You danced so beautifully, Diana. With a smile, Diana looked up at me, blushed a bit. See her face go a slight pink made her almost make her look so adorable.
You flatter me, dear.
I only smiled before she slowly stood back up, took my hand, surprising me, kept her head down. However, it made me even more confused as to what she was doing. Diana?
Dear, I'm sorry.
Huh? For what? Diana grimaced a bit before looking up at me with serious eyes, flickered back and forth between red and gold. She stood her ground.
For the intolerance from my kind. Humans aren't exactly welcomed in this world.
That's what this was about? I understand completely, but it seemed to hit Diana the hardest. For all, she was the one who brought me to this world. I kept Diana's cheek and smiled at her, causing her expression to go from shame to surprise. Diana, it's alright. I love you. Diana hitched her breath. It was true, though. I had grown to love her for everything she had done. She was brave, powerful, beautiful, everything I desired in a person. My heart beat wildly for her. I can only pray she understood my feelings. Diana looked, hands, her eyes watering a bit. Instinctively wiped her eyes with a bit of my fingers, now concerned. Diana?
I don't know what love is.
I stared, dumbfounded. She didn't know what love was? However, she surprised me by placing a gentle, shaking hand on my cheek, leaning in.
But I'm willing to learn, if it's with you.
I gasped slightly, seeing the earnest and care in her eyes before she closed them. Gently planted a kiss on my cheek. Soft shudder ran down my spine as I felt her soft lips press against my skin. Alright guys, so we're gonna do this. I got my finger ready to change to this screen. This screen, yes, this screen. Couldn't take it anymore. I needed to kiss her. I pulled Diana close and wrapped my arms around her neck, capturing her lips with my own. She gasped, surprised at my sudden eagerness, but slowly began to melt into the kiss between us. Her lips were as heavenly as the night I first tasted them. Her arms gently wrapped themselves around my waist, pulling me close to her body, and jangled to her brute dance garb echoed in the room. Wait, what? The jangle of her brute dance. Okay, right. Making me smile slightly at the surprised noise. I had nearly forgotten she was still in her dancer outfit. On their own, my fingers slowly danced around Diana's shoulders and traced over the seams of her outfit, making her body shudder ever so slightly. Was she enjoying a mere touch that much? Or was she hungry for energy? Pulled away slightly, seeing her eyes dance between red and gold, some control trying to be maintained with her gaze on me. She was out of energy. She needed more than just a kiss. But now, I would take it slow. I leaned back in and kissed her again, this time biting her lower lip and enticing her to let go of the control she had. I wanted her to relax, for me to be the one to comfort her and hold her against me. Maybe it was because of the call her succubus body had on me. Maybe it was because my heart desired to be with her that much. I didn't care, but I obeyed the command of my heart to drive her to the pleasure we both craved. The night would be for us, and the warmth of the afterglow would be exquisite. Dana released an almost carnal moan against my lips and tightened her grip on my waist, almost slamming my body against hers. My plan was working. She was falling for my temptations. I couldn't help but smirk that painted itself across my face at the gesture. I couldn't help the smirk that painted itself across the page of my gesture. In return, I quickly released my hands up Diana's body and combed my fingers into her hair before gripping her horns. My surprise, Diana's released a moan against my lips, causing me to pull away, staring into Diana's surprised eyes. I blushed around across her cheeks, but her gaze melted into one of lust and desire as I held her horns in were her horns her weak spot? Gripped them harder. I was right. I pulled Diana close to me with her horns and almost slammed my lips into hers, wanting to devour the moans she was releasing. I felt myself become more passionate in the kiss between us, needing to feel more of her. Diana dug her nails into my hips and practically pushed me into the bed behind, causing us to bounce on the mattress, reflectively releasing horns, and felt my hands fall back on either side of me as Diana smirked down at my form.
You're not playing fair.
Ooh! I'm not a pervert, you're a pervert. I felt the small warmth ignite in my core, pleading with me to ravish her again, but I felt myself become lost in her dominant gaze over me. I felt the clothing on my body become uncomfortable, and I wanted to take it all off beneath her, but I remained locked in her sight. Diana ran a hand along my cheek and traced a finger down my body, slowing its dance over each curve. It found lovingly and sending shivers up my spine. Look who's talking. Diana chuckled before leading in nose to nose.
Let me make you feel good.
At last, Diana became the one who initiated our kiss, her hands pressing down on my waist to pin me to the bed beneath us. I wrapped my legs around her waist, pulling her to me and causing a chuckle to echo from beneath our lips. And her hands began to comb over my skin, tugged my shirt off on my body. I felt her pull away to strip it off of me. It was tossed to the side to be forgotten, for our focus remained on each other. I felt myself turn red at what we were slowly diving into. Taking in the fact that I had initiated a dance with the succubus had grown to love. Oh shit, I didn't finish reading that. I don't know why. It was unfair that she was in control. It was only natural. I had barely noticed the garb over Dinah's body and disappearing, leaving her bare over me, despite the plump purple taint over her skin covering her essentials. I could tell that she was very much nude, just from the heat between us. Dinah's kiss trailed down my cheeks and neck, nipped over my skin, and making the warmth within my core burn even hotter. And every kiss and touch placed on me made my mind spin and dance in endless waves of soft euphoria. I knew that this wasn't her first time being an intimate, but I could tell that every touch she made she only did for me and my own pleasure, truly indeed intended to make me feel good. I became like putty in her hands, my own eventually resting above my hand as I let her strip me bare and massage her every inch of my body. She didn't just kiss me over, made every muscle in my body obey her with her fingers and palms. Even as her tongue licked over my most delicate spots, she took great care in watching my reflections, my reactions, and listening to my moans, working her way into my mind, body, and soul to tie them all together in a hearted frenzy of lust and desire. This was truly the work of a master succubus, and I was able to call her mine. Even as my cries echoed through the room, she didn't stop until I was floating on cloud nine. Her pleasure came from my moans and multiple releases, filling herself with my energy and devouring pleasure we shared hungrily and lovingly. I was in heaven, the succubus's grace. I could barely register her arms around my form. She held me close to her, kissed over my hair.
My sweet love, I will hold you close for as long as I can.
That will be with you forever. My heart fluttered, the feeling ebbing within my chest. I was happy, and I would keep this happiness close to me for as long as I lived. Alright, cool. I need to go pee. I actually do need to go pee though. I've been drinking so much water trying to keep my voice from killing itself. So the throat is killing me. Jesus. I awoke after a peaceful sleep, staring up at Diana as she leaned back against the bedpost, reading a book I didn't recognize. As I started to shift, Diana looked down at me and grew a loving smile. Alright, cool. That sex scene was dope. I'm on my last bottle of water. The more I talk, the more my voice doesn't hurt. So,
Good morning, dear. Ready for today?
despite feeling the tired effects of the morning, I nodded with a smile of my own. I could tell that today was going to be a good day. Diana closed her book and placed it on the table beside the bed, where standing, stretching her body. However, mid stretch, Diana froze. In fact, the entire room became frozen, as if time itself had stopped. Huh? Diana? I felt myself move freely, despite the air around me being still. I stood from the bed and walked around to Diana, seeing her frozen like a statue. What was going on?
Human.
My heart froze as I looked to see Sarah on the corner of the room, arms crossed and stared cold as ice. What was he doing? Sarah, what are you?
Come with me.
Without another word, Sarah left the room into the hall. I was massively confused, but followed. Now worried what would happen if I didn't. As we walked down the hall, I was stunned to see every person in the castle frozen in time. How was this possible? How was Sarah doing this? Sarah was silent the entire walk. Eventually, we walked to the gold sets of doors which led to the chambers. Family was killed. I hesitated, staring waefully at Sarah before seeing him open the chamber. To my surprise, the room changed from a nursery room full of blood to a view of the outdoor space. As far as I could see, trees and plant life, bustling and full of life. No? Sarah stepped in and waited at the door, ushering me inside. I followed, but every nerve in my body yelling at me to just run back, to see this through, whatever this was. Sarah led me into the forest of trees, making sure I was able to see him the entire time, until we reached the patch of land with a singular large tree, covered in pink and purple petals. Whoa. I found myself becoming entranced by the sight. What was this place? Why was it here? As I examined the tree, I noted the major abundance of fruits in the branches. I I smiled, knowing exactly what they were. Sweet flowers.
You know of them?
I nodded. Anna gave me a slice of one in the human world. The best thing I've ever tasted. I could faintly remember the taste of it. It was perfectly sweet and moist. I was so full of energy after that day. Hardly able to keep it at all. Keep it all in. Sarah let out a small chuckle, drawing my attention.
I was barely walking when I had my first taste. My lady climbed the tree and picked it herself before splitting it open down the middle and giving me one of the halves.
Slightly smiled, imagining a young Diana and Sarah doing such a thing. As my gaze wandered to the tree, I spotted the crowns of Diana's parents and sisters at the base, making me frown a bit. The sight, Sarah let out a small sigh.
Tell me honestly, do you truly believe you can make her happy?
I looked up at Sarah, surprised at the question. His face was stern and serious as he gripped to his spear, a white-knuckled grip. Why was he asking such a question? With a nod, I took a breath, stood up straight. I do. I hate these fucking. I hate these things where I have to choose. I'm halfway through, by the way, which is nice, but. I didn't want to fight over this like children. Yes, I loved her, but so did he. Because I had to push him away. Well, he had served her his entire life. Sarah stared hard at me, taking in what I was saying before raising a spear, pointing it at me.
You truly love her?
I do. Sorry if that upsets you. Moment passes. What would Saren do? I prayed that he wouldn't strike me down. I hoped that he was willing to listen and compromise. A small chuckle escaped Sarah's lips, causing me to look at him in confusion. His face painted his concern and his strange thoughts on his almost humorous situation. As he lowered his spear, he shook his head.
It doesn't upset me. I just want Azayr to be happy.
As do I. Saren locked eyes with me, gazing into my soul, judged my words for their truth. I was being honest and truly. Know that both of us cared about and loved Diana was amazing to fathom. Eventually, Sarah smiled slightly.
Then, maybe it's best that we both try to make her happy.
Smiled and nodded, happy to know that he understood. This wasn't a contest, nor was this something to fight about. We both loved her, then. The best thing to do was to both shower her in the love that we felt she deserved.
What is going on?
Sarah and I suddenly looked to the direction of Diana's voice. Seeing her completely red in the face in anger, she walked forward, Sarah bowed his head in submission.
My lady,
I asked Sarah if we could talk in private. Diana stopped walking and stared at me, the most confused look I had ever seen. I giggled a bit before stepping to her and taking her hand. We need to chat about a little something. About you, of course.
About me?
I nodded with a grin before walking over to Sarah and placing a hand on his shoulder. Making him look up at me, I lowered my hand and offered it to him, helping him stand up before continuing. We are in love with you. We both are in love with you. The look on Diana's face was both hilarious and adorable. Her face turned completely red as she darted her eyes back and forth between the both of us. No, this is the right thing to do, but kind of an asshole. Truly loved her and wanted to be with her for the rest of my life. I knew what Sarah had been with her his entire life, but I couldn't stop what I was feeling for her sake. Sarah stared at me, taking in what I was saying before raising a spear, pointing it at
you
me.
truly love her?
I do. I'm sorry if that upsets you. A moment passed. What would Sarah do? I prayed that he would compromise. A small chuckle escaped Sarah's lips, causing me to look at him in confusion. Face painted in concern as his strange thoughts on this almost humorous situation. He lowered his spirit and shook his
It
head.
doesn't upset me. I just want Azair to be happy.
As do I. Sarah locked eyes with me, gazing into my soul, judging my words and truth. Being honest, truly, I was. Wait. To know that both of us cared about, loved Diana was amazing to fathom. Eventually, Sarah smiled slightly despite his heart breaking beneath his.
Then, you should continue being at her side.
I was astonished. Sarah was giving me his blessing. I wasn't sure what to say. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing was able to come out from the sheer shock I was in. Sarah, however, chuckled quietly, holding his forehead.
How pathetic am I? I was ready when Diana went off to marry her betrothed, but I'm nowhere near ready for this.
I didn't help but frown. Sarah deeply loved Diana, and I felt terrible having to be the one to break his heart. Still, I couldn't lie to myself about this. I would have been in the same position if Sarah took her away from me. I took a breath, trying to be strong. Sorry. I promised, though, that I would protect and love her for the rest of my life. With a grimace, Sarah looked to me once more, judging my truth. He found no deceit. He nodded and took a shaky breath. For the first time since we had met, it was the first time I saw him give up.
What is going on?
Sarah and I suddenly looked in the direction of Diana's voice, seeing her completely red in the face in anger. She walked forward. Sarah bowed his head in submission.
My lady,
I asked Sarah if we can talk in private. Diana stopped walking, stared at me in the most confused look I had ever seen. I giggled a bit before stepping to her and taking her hand. I wanted to ask him if it was okay to be with you. Part of your family, after all. Sarah looked up at me in shock, not in an unpleasant way. He seemed more surprised that I was covering for him, as if anything. Diana looked to Sarah, seeing his expression, before looking to me in mid-curiosity.
You asked him if you could be with me?
I nodded, pulling her to me slightly. As I softly said her real name, she silently gasped in shock. Zura, I love you, and I want to be with you forever. I know that I'm just a human, but I want to be by your side and love you for the rest of my days. Diana was completely speechless. She stared deep into my gaze, both in shock and in utter amazement. I, however, stood my ground. My heart was in the air, hoping it wouldn't come crashing down as Diana smiled, however, began to swell. Then I gently held my cheek and caressed lovingly.
I would be honored to call you mine, my heart.
Yeah, dude, these love stories make me sad. I feel for him, though. I feel for him. I couldn't stop myself from crying. My chest became overwhelmed by emotions of love that I almost couldn't contain myself. Sarah stood and smiled at the both of us, causing us to look over. His hand squeezed over mine as she looked apologetically at regard.
Zero,
It's all right, my lady. All I have ever wanted was your happiness.
Sarah walked over and gently leaned over, kissing Diana's cheek before stepping back.
I will serve you and protect your love for as long as I live.
Oh, it's so sad. Diana choked a sob, covering her mouth as tears gently began to flow from her eyes. Sarah only smiled and walked around us, forward to where the castle was, leaving us together. We watched him go before turning to each other. I wiped away Diana's tears, and she slowly tried to calm down, despite it being futile. Chuckled a bit at the sight. I love you, Israel. Izaru. Diana took a breath, trying to regain herself, before pulling me to her and wrapping her arms around me.
I love you too.
I leaned up, captured her lips in mine, earning a sweet kiss back. As our lips touched, the wind around us picked up, causing the leaves on the trees above us to sway. Pink and purple leaves that had fallen from the branches flew up and danced around us ecstatically, as if the world was giving us its blessing. I was more than happy to be with this woman, and I vowed to give her everything. She would do the same for me. We were completely happy. The energy that sparked within Diana completely filled her with power, giving her the strength to completely annihilate the Demon Lord's armies, almost single-handedly. What many expected to take years to accomplish, Diana took days. Every attack the Demon Lord threw at us endured with him, becoming utterly defenseless, soldierless, and powerless, despite him managing to escape each time. We dwindled his troops to a mere handful of imp demons. Soon we had cornered him against a stretch of water called the Decaying Sea. His castle, Sarah, Diana, and I stood upon a cliff top, staring down at the legions that had gathered below us as we mentally prepared ourselves for what would be the final battle.
To think this will finally be over.
Once it is, you will become the new queen of this world.
I looked over to Diana, seeing a soft glimmer of fear on her face. Was she not prepared for that responsibility? I took her hand, causing her to look over at me in surprise. As I nodded, I let out a grin paint over my face. You'll be an amazing queen. Diana looked to the crowd and stepped forward, slightly arching her back towards the legions below. She no longer was just Diana, but she had become the mighty queen of the rebellion, one that I loved with all my heart.
Milites! Et hoc liberati esturei tramcun tuis omnibus conversiris. Sto vobiscum reducitic vos ad spem. Nocte, lavabir mur, arcem, hostium sanguine. Ele diu dominati sun nostri. Nostes struet, ium mitere, profundissimum, inferni detractos.
Diana summoned her saber, letting it shine brilliantly as the purple taint over her skin began to twist and turn. Before my eyes, the taint on her back took shape, lifting off of Diana's skin, and morphed into her beautiful demonic wing. I watched with pride as Diana's body lifted off the ground and began to fly over the legion, slowly gliding towards the castle.
To war! To battle!
And that cry mocked the dawn of change. The demon world would end the age of the demon lord's tyranny, and begin the age of unified peace and prosperity. With Diana soaring through the air bowed to her and proved her worthy of such power. As I started, time around me slowed, as I took in everything that had happened. We were at the end of this war. Where would we truly go from there? Who knew? But I knew that I would be at Diana's side forevermore. I managed to seduce her into bringing me to a new world and experience everything. We were in love, and I was certain she would become the beacon of life, not only for me, for every demon in this world. After all, she managed to seduce me too. The demon war was only the beginning of our lives together.
Well, you did it! Congratulations! You've made it to the end of your story. I have to say, I am very surprised at how it turned out. Nevertheless, I'm glad things worked out in the end, whether it was for the better or otherwise. I mean, come on. You got to be with a succubus and help her fight in a war. How crazy is that? You even got her to admit that she is in love with you. Go you! Demons are very hard to convince that you love them. Tell me about it, I know. Anyways, you've been through a lot, so why don't we skip to... Huh? You want to know what happened after the war? Well, I mean, I guess I could tell you. After the war was finished, the entire rebellion celebrated. Word spread far and wide about the rebellion's success, and soon every kingdom in the abyssal plains had become united with the new authority. You would think demons would be more hostile towards each other, being demons and all, but the threat of the Demon Lord was what brought the entire world together. The final battle between Diana and the Demon Lord became quickly one-sided, as he was no match for the power she had gathered from your love.
She tripped up on her words like I do.
Guess the power of love really does conquer all. Anyway, when the war ended, the entire rebellion celebrated as Diana presented his head to the masses like a trophy before burning it and letting the ashes sink into the ground. The day after, she became queen of the demon world. It definitely shocked her, and it took her a while to get used to being called Your Highness by the other demons, but you helped her through it. Sarah began to focus more on the military and only guarded Diana publicly. When they were out of the public eye, however, Sarah left her to you to care for. Diana always preferred your company regardless. You got her wrapped around your little finger, don't you? There's still the question of what you'll do now that the demon war is over. Diana is the queen and all, so she can't really leave. You'll figure it out, I'm sure.
Right. The demon world finally knew peace. It was a grand moment. Sounds of the millions' cheers echoing and burning themselves in my memory in celebration for the end of the war. And it finally destroyed the demon lord. Good enough, we would watch her become the matriarch of the abysmal plains, uniting the entire world under her rule. It was almost too unreal to experience and see as a human. However, I was happy for Diana, and I was proud to stand beside her and support her through it all. War was an experience and a half. I would never forget it for as long as I lived. As for me, I found myself drawn to Diana, hoping to spend every night with her in my arms. With her in her arms. The human world became a faintly drifting memory as my life embedded itself into the demon world. Many demons questioned me, but Sarah and Diana defended me with every conflict that came. However, there was never a day that went on that I didn't wonder, did I make the right choice? It was a heavy chapter of my life, one that tested the love between me and Diana. Art seemed to remind me that I had come to the demon world to help Diana, and now it's time for her to honor her end of the deal. She had to teach me everything about the five world and about magic. As a queen, that wasn't possible now. To my surprise, I didn't seem to mind. I had been given the experience of a lifetime, and I easily accepted it as a promise fulfilled. Faint memory of my own powers slightly tinkled through me. I grew confident, eagerly reminding me that I had strength of my own. Never let anyone come between me and Diana. Thoughts of it all echoed in my mind, and I laid in bed, looking up at the ceiling with a wide smile on my face. But this danger's being real. War was an adventure fun. Look back upon in my took in a breath and I let out a sigh, leaning back against the pillow beneath the head and closing my eyes. I was at peace and everything was all right.
Are you okay, dear?
I opened my eyes. The sound of my pet name. Looking up to see Diana smiling at me from her side of our bed. I could only giggle and cuddle close to her, feeling her wrap her arms around me. I was just thinking about us.
Were you now? What about us?
With a smile, I nuzzled Diana's chest softly and closed my eyes, listening to her steady and loving heartbeat. How thankfully I am to be here with you. Diana stared down at me, gently hugging me to her. I could feel her own joy, this situation resonant from her embrace and her kiss over my head.
I am thankful that you're here too. You have done so much for me, and I will cherish you forevermore.
I couldn't help but look at her beautiful ruby eyes, feeling her stroke my chest lovingly.
I vow to make you happy and protect you with my life.
And you, and I you, Azure. The sound of her real name rolling out of my tongue made her giggle and nuzzle close to me. I loved her real name and I loved holding her against me.
I love you.
I believed every word. Let her words embed themselves into my heart, and I could remember them forever. As Diana hugged me to her warm body, we let out a simultaneous sigh of contentment. I would love her and continue to hold her close the rest of my life. Nothing would be able to tear me away from her any longer. That was perfect. Ever. The right choice. It was nice. I liked the first game too. I'm wondering why they didn't show the protagonist. in this one. It was first person. The first game wasn't first person. I don't. Well, it was first person, but you could see yourself. I think they did it so you could insert yourself into the story more. But yeah, this was a good game. Some song. I hope this isn't copyright. Aw. Nice game. Malix is in this too? Alright, well, if you guys want to see the rest of the endings, buy this game, because I'm not going to put them on YouTube. But yeah, I need to play the other endings of the first game, because this is the only ending I played for the first game. I did Diana's ending, so this game I continued with. Oh no, this isn't. This is their song. He's in Kickback Starters. Look how many Emily's there are. There's still more. Holy shit. Ten Emily's. That's a lot of Emily's. These games are so good. I loved the first one and I loved this one. Got 5 more. 5 hours and 30 minutes, dude. I'm past the half point. I'm so happy. Special thanks to families and friends, past and Kickstarter backers and supporters. Suduce Me, a Tolme fanbase. Up dicks, crab nipples, and Richard Pickles. Oh. Deputy producer Rachel Costa. Created by Michaela Laws. The end. Oh, that was nice. That was nice. Question mark. I don't think they should make another. I think 2 games are good. Especially when this ended off like such a good night. Like such a good one. Oh yeah, I need to know the
Oh my god, a human! Hi, hello, good to see you, human. How you gotten here, I will never know, but hey, fuck it, let's just say hi. Hi, hello! I am Michaela, and I'm the current, substitute librarian here at Yggdrasil. How can I help you? Wait, what? You wanna what? You wanna look in the... You're serious? I mean, I guess I could show you? I mean, what do you want to see? You want to see what happened to them? Oh, no. I can't show you that. I mean, I'm technically not the keeper here. I'm just filling in for a friend. She'd be mega pissed if I showed you what happened to them. I mean, of course, if you had the angel's
Yeah,
password,
I knew
could
it was
tell
that.
ya,
It was like the same thing with
but
the other
I
game.
doubt you have it.
I don't. You're right. I do not have it. And I won't do that. I'll leave it up to you guys because this game is such a good game. If you want to go through all the endings, buy it yourself. Go through all the endings. But yeah, you guys enjoyed that. I loved the first one and I love this one. These games are cool. I should replay the first one because I only did one of the endings and I cheated to do the bonus that I put on my channel. So yeah, you guys enjoyed that. I'm gonna continue my stream now. You guys need to comment, rate, subscribe, do all that cool stuff. And I haven't posted on it forever on YouTube, but peace.